What does it mean to get the backstory? It means asking the hard questions and getting to the heart of what matters about your mental, spiritual, financial, and physical well being. In my quest to find wholeness, wellness, and end the 40 years of obesity that ravaged my body, I found that it was my own stories that were keeping me trapped in processed food addiction. Once I started asking the right questions, those same stories led to brand new consciousness, mindfulness, and agency. Each month on Get the Backstory Live, we take on the tough questions so you can find the healing, hope, and transformation hidden in your story. Hello, and welcome to Get the Backstory Live. My name is Michelle Petties, and I am your host for the debut broadcast of Get the Backstory Live. And it is my honor. It is my honor to speak with you tonight, to share the screen with some amazing panelists as we discuss the issues that are so important when it comes to men's health. So on Get the Backstory, I just want to let you know that on Get the Backstory, we have real conversations. We have real talk. We address the hard questions. We address the tough questions. But before we jump into tonight's conversation, I'd like to give you just a little bit of the backstory about who I am and why we're here. So in 2018, in September 2018, I started a health journey. I started a health journey that would change my life. And on that journey, the journey involved just years of not understanding my body, understanding my health, and how everything was all connected. I was a food addict and battled obesity for most of my adult life. Yeah. And then something happened. And I got some clarity and I got some understanding about changing my beliefs about my health and about how to manage food, hunger, and eating. And once I got that understanding and that clarity, it became very important to me to change my story and help others change their stories. And that's what Get the Backstory is all about, helping us change our stories so that we can get on the road to better health. And June is Men's Health Month. And it's nothing more important for us to talk about in June than men's health. So tonight, in the debut broadcast of Get the Backstory Live, I have assembled a powerhouse panel of men that are going to help us really take a close look at what's happening with men and their health. It's a broad topic, it's a big topic, it's a big issue. And we need different voices because there's a lot to cover. And we're going to jump right into it. I'm going to bring on each one of the panelists, introduce them, and then we're going to jump right into the discussion because the first thing that we're going to talk about is the major challenge that is facing men as it relates to their health today. But first, let me introduce the first panelist. So the first panelist that I would like to bring on and have you meet is Mujahid Muhammad. And he is the Chief Executive Officer of Keys Enterprises. He's a clinical therapist at the University of Maryland and a therapeutic crisis and trauma trainer at Catholic Charities. So, Mujahid, welcome. Welcome to Get the Backstory.
Thank you. Thank you.
Did I
I
leave any
appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for welcoming me.
did I leave anything out in my introduction? I don't want to I want to make sure that I get in all the vital information.
No, it's all there. It's all there. So I'm the CEO of Keys Enterprises, where we offer therapeutic services throughout the state of Maryland, a little bit in New Jersey, and in Accra, Ghana.
Oh, Accra, Ghana. Wow, wow, wow. I love Ghana. I was just there in October. It was quite a transformational experience. So I'm happy to see that you're expanding your work there. Our second guest goes by the name of Muscle Man Malcolm. Malcolm Stidham. Let's bring Malcolm to the screen. It is so good to see you. Malcolm Stidham. I want to call him, I want to call you by your proper name. Muscle Man Malcolm is a competitive power lifter and combat sports journalist. Here's the thing about Muscle Man Malcolm. He has over 50,000 YouTube followers. Malcolm, thank you so much. I'm honored that you are on the show tonight.
Of course. Glad to be here.
Appreciate it. So did I leave anything out as I offered up my description of who you are? Is there something more that you would like to add?
I mean, I'm just the greatest wrestling tuber of all time, world ranked powerlifter. I'm just the best thing going to sliced bread, you know?
Of course. How could I leave that out? How could I leave that out? All right. Our next panelist, I would like to introduce everybody to Daniel Morse. And Daniel is the co-founder. I'm so excited that he is on the screen with us tonight, all the way from Austin, Texas, my home state. Daniel is a co-founder of Social Prescribing USA. And its the whole mission of this organization is to make social prescribing available to every American by 2035. Now, I'm saying that like everybody knows what social prescribing is. So first things, tell us a little bit, Dan, about what social prescribing is and why we need it.
Social prescribing is doctors prescribing not only pills, but also community activities like a social group, volunteering, a nature walk, art class. And I'll get into the details when we go into the bigger conversation. But happy to be here. And Malcolm's got me wanting to go to the gym. So man, your energy is infectious, I gotta say.
All right, thank you so much for that, Dan. Our next panelist. All right, let's hoop it up some for Ken Harvey, former Washington commander. Ken, so happy to see you on screen tonight and have you be a part of this conversation. And I introduce you as an NFL superstar, but you're so much more than that since you're retired. You're a philanthropist. I read that you're a Renaissance man. You're an author. You're doing some training, and I want to make sure that everybody knows everything that you're doing. In case I left anything out, if you can
no,
jump right in there.
I think I wrote enough for you to say some great things about me. No, look, I'm like everyone else. You live life. I've had a bump in that I played in the NFL, but life goes on beyond the NFL, and you have that dash in between when you're born and when you die. And what do you do with it? So I'm just trying to do something positive with it.
Yeah, that dash, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
That space in the middle, right?
Yep.
We don't have any control over when we're born or when we die. But that thing in the middle, right? That thing in the middle, we can drive it. We can drive it as long as we have the right kind of consciousness. So tonight, let's hope we're going to be asking the questions to get us to a higher consciousness.
I think Malcolm might have did push-ups outside and jumped out the room. Got there early.
All right. Thank you so much, Ken. All right, our next panelist, I want to introduce you all to Aaron Hill. So Aaron is coming to us from Baltimore, I know, and I want to say, my gosh, Aaron, it seems like we go way back. I met you when I was at WEAA, and you were on the music scene, and I was so captivated. I was so captivated by your music, and I still am. But you have you've just taken a whole different path over the past couple of years, and I see that you are the creator of 5M Soulful Self-Care. I know that we're going to hear more about that as the show continues, that you are a mindfulness and meditation teacher. And, that mindfulness and meditation just, it speaks to me, because there's so much healing in in that we don't even know, right?
Yeah.
And that you are aspiring, stretching, and flexibility coach. Was it strength, endurance, flexibility, and balance, right? Aren't those the things, right, that we need? All right.
And
So
no
have I
good.
left out anything, Aaron? Please share if I've left something out that you want the listeners to know.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I'm grateful to be here. I decided during the pandemic to take 20 years of musical experience and put it into jumping into psychotherapy, mindfulness, and meditation. So I'm here today because it's all about men and mental health. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you for that. So our next panelist, the more I introduce you all, the happier I get, because I just know how rich this conversation is going to be. So our next guest is Dr. David Fakunle. Are you coming on up? Oh, good to see you. Good to see you. So you are a man after my own heart. You are a storyteller, and so along with some other things. I mean, I'm certainly intrigued as I read, your bio, and I see that phrase "mercenary for change." And if you could tell us a little bit about what that means, and anything else that you want the
Gotcha.
audience to know who you are.
So mercenaries are about getting paid, right? And you can pay me in two ways. Either change my bank account or you can change my relationships. Both are valuable. The change part is much more important than being a mercenary. It is about leaving the world better than I left it. It's about making that bump in between the time I showed up and the time I check out meaningful. And I'm grateful that this is a part of the meaning that I get to generate during that bump in time. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that shows up as we get into the conversation.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Fakunle. I appreciate you. And we're winding it down. Our next guest is Nigel Reid. Nigel, if you'll come on board, it's good to see you. I see you in the parking lot or in your car somewhere, but that's okay, because what's important is that we show up, right? We show up where we are. So the fact that you're making it work where you are, that's a good thing. That's a very good thing. I want to introduce Nigel. Nigel is a nutritional therapist, a certified health coach, focusing on nutritional immunology and functional nutrition as a whole. Now that's a mouthful. That's excuse the pun, but it seemed appropriate. And so, Nigel, if I've left something out about who you are, would you please share that with our listeners, because we want the full picture. We want the whole picture.
Right. Well, the whole picture would be that my team and I we are on a mission as of 2023. We call it the Great Immune Reset. For some time, we've been looking for an opportunity whereby we could fill some gaps, some very fundamental gaps, in the way that healthcare is provided, the way that we think of healthcare for our own selves, being our own best advocates. And we have found that solution, and now we are spreading the word.
Yeah. Man, what we put inside of our bodies is so important. And as I see this this conversation shaping up, and I think about the nutrition aspect, and I think about the mindfulness aspect, all of these things come together when we start thinking about not just better health for men, but better health for everybody. So this is a conversation that is due. It's due. And with that, we're going to bring on our last panelist. It is so good to see you, Dr. Newby.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
We appreciate it. You're in Norfolk, Virginia Beach. What?
Yeah, I'm in Norfolk, Virginia.
Okay, all right. So all the way from Norfolk, Virginia. And I want you to know that Muscle Man Malcolm is from that same area too. So there you go. How about that?
I tell you, he's the man about town. Everybody knows Brother Malcolm.
So, Dr. Newby, I do want to make sure that I give you your introduction is due. And then you are a cardiologist.
Yes.
You are a CEO and administrator and an entrepreneur and a community activist, and you are the current medical director of health equity for Centara Health System. Is that right?
Yes, it is. So I have
And
about,
I,
I
and I
have
feel
about
like
800 jobs.
I feel like there's a whole bunch of other stuff that I'm leaving out.
Well, I will say this. I mean, as a cardiologist, of course, my biggest, I guess, push is always the health and well-being of my community. I grew up in Norfolk. I trained at Emory in Atlanta, Duke University, and then back here where I started to practice. And I got into health equity more or less with the pandemic. And I looked at how the rollout of the aspects of COVID-19, in my opinion, could have been done better. And I said I could complain about it or I could get busy and participate. So I actually went back to school. I'm actually in on top of everything else I do. I'm actually doing a grad school program at UNC Chapel Hill in public health. So I'm getting my master's in that on top of my MD degree that I currently have.
Oh, man. I feel like I want to go take a nap now. It's exhausted me, and I'm just sitting here.
Well, I'm gonna tell you, going back to school was a little interesting. I haven't been in I mean, we have to do continuous medical education regardless, but sitting in a classroom, we actually write papers again. I was a little far removed from that. So, but it took me a while to get back into the groove of being in a classroom. But I tell you, I enjoy it though. The amount of information you learn or how to really engage a community has been phenomenal.
Oh, that's good stuff. That's good stuff. All right. So now that the panel is all assembled, we can jump right into this discussion. And I want to tell you that share with you before in preparing for this conversation. I went to Google, right, and I looked at the health issues that are facing men today, and I saw what I've always heard. I saw high blood pressure, right? Like high blood pressure, heart disease, cancer. I saw a few other things: heart disease, cancer, lung cancer, hypertension, and I feel like there was another one. But what struck me was that I felt diabetes for sure. Um, but as I was looking at the list and looking at all these maladies that afflict men, I thought that there's got to be more to it than this. That it's just not these diseases. It's just not these illnesses. And if you'll notice in the question is, what is the number one health challenge? And so challenge in my mind, doesn't necessarily have to be some form of illness. It could be something else. And I just want to just do a rapid fire round robin and get the take from each of you what you feel like the number one health challenge facing men today is. And Mujahid, we can start with you. You're muted. Mujahid, we can't hear you. Okay, while we're getting the sound.
Sorry about that. I was on mute.
Okay.
So as a therapist, it's always easy for us to go mental health. But I got to tell you, what I want to talk about more of is what I see from the individuals which I serve. So we see individuals, their families losing men to cardiovascular issues more than anything else. The next thing, believe it or not, you're correct, is diabetes. And then I see prostate cancer. And we don't talk about prostate cancer, and I think that this gets me to my point. The number one thing for me is fear. Because the idea of fear holding us back from doing what we know we need to do is something that is creating more deaths in our communities than anything else. A lot of times we know when we were supposed to go see a doctor. We know that we're supposed to eat a little bit healthier. We actually feel our heart starting to tighten, but we do nothing about it out of fear. We do nothing out of it because we feel like we need to be strong men for our families, for our children. And that vulnerability puts us at more risk, I believe, than anything else. So fear will be the word.
Fear. Okay, that is some important insight around why we do what we do or why we don't do what we should do. And it doesn't just apply to men. I think it applies to many of us as well. So, Muscle Man Malcolm, your take on what do you think the biggest health challenge facing men today is?
For me, just seeing like the atmosphere in like my college campus and gym life and et cetera, even on like a social media platform, usually comes down to confidence. A lot of people around like my age, at least, I'm 23, I'm a young buck, but a lot of people just don't have the confidence to go out and actually do the things they're supposed to do, which is kind of based off the point I already said about fear of not going to the doctor, et cetera. People just don't want to leave their house nowadays. I mean, everyone's so obsessed in my generation, at least with their TikToks and their YouTube and et cetera, et cetera. They don't like doing anything, and it causes them their own health to deteriorate. So it would be confidence.
Confidence. Okay. All right. I see where we're going here. So, Aaron, as think about this, what bubbles up for you?
Well, what definitely bubbles up for me is mental health for sure. We are leading in depression, anxiety, and suicide because we're expected to be strong, stoic, and self-reliant. You know, we don't get a lot of support from our families or communities, and we come from backgrounds where, like everyone is echoing here today, that the idea of being a man is actually being strong and stuffing down your emotions. So I think that that is definitely at the top of the list, and I think that that pours out into everything else. Mentally, as we're saying here, with fear and with some other things, if you're in that place, then the rest of your experience will follow that physically as well. So that does lead to cardiovascular disease and cancer and these other kind of things. So for me, I'm working with veterans every week with PTSD and all the way down to just normal people facing regular life problems, and the mental health piece of it, that aspect of it. And sometimes it's not fear because you can't fear what you don't know. Sometimes it's lack of knowledge and
Mhm.
information, as well as a few other things. I'll save it for the next round.
Okay, you're sitting for the next round. But I appreciate you bringing up that the comment, and I'll get on to the next panelist. It's not always fear. It's not having the knowledge. And when I think about my own situation, I think that for years I was just ignorant.
Right.
I was just ignorant about what good health looked like, what it felt like, and I was disconnected. I was
Yes.
disconnected. My thoughts were disconnected from my body, and,
Yes.
and,
Yes.
um, and that the getting to the place where I could integrate those things has really made all the difference. But that sometimes you just don't know because you if you haven't seen it, if it hasn't been modeled for you, sometimes with our health, we're at a place where we don't even know what we don't know, right?
Very true.
And we don't even know the questions to ask. And once we figure out the right question, that's moving us in the right direction. So,
Yes.
Ken, Mr. Harvey, what are your thoughts on the biggest challenge facing men today as it relates to the health?
It's when you're in the middle, you kind of get what everybody else was saying because there's fear and lack of knowledge. I think fear
Mhm.
comes in a lot of different formats and a lot of different ways. Fear of you go to the doctors, but you don't know what that bill is going to be, how much your insurance is going to pay and not pay. That's a fear of that next bill coming up that your insurance doesn't pay and how you're going to have to deal with that. Lack of knowledge, you have so many different things that are telling you you should eat this, you shouldn't eat that. This is the right way to do it, and so it's hard to figure out what is the correct way to do it. And so that lack of knowledge, while you may have some knowledge, you don't know what's the right knowledge or what's right for you.
Mhm.
And is it a
Mhm.
sales pitch? Is it whatever? So I think a combination of what everyone said thus far. Those are the reasons why.
And as you say that, Ken, I'm reminded of what Malcolm said about confidence. It's like if you have so much information that's swirling around in the atmosphere, then that speaks to, um, do I am do I have the confidence to make the right decision, right? And then that goes back to what Mujahid said about being afraid of making the wrong decision, and that immobilizes us sometimes. So there are a lot of things that are going on, um, inside our heads, or inside not just the heads of men, but inside of all of our heads, that that are barriers to action. So it's about getting some mental clarity, working on our belief system to move us into the right behavior. Um, so Dan, I'm I'm waiting with bated breath to hear what your response is, and how you see it through the lens of social prescribing.
So one of the biggest challenges facing men is a concept that's not really well known yet, and it's actually something that staff at the American Heart Association, who deals with cardiovascular health, is actually taking more seriously. It's something that's affected by 60% of men experience it, and it's something that I think is going to balloon into one of the biggest health issues in the coming decade, and that is the concept of social health. And it's really the next chapter of health, because if you look at healthcare over the last 50 years, there's been an evolution every 20 or 30 years. There's evidence-based medicine in the late 1800s, public health in the early 1900s, diet, exercise, nutrition came in the 60s, along with therapy. You have neuroscience in the 90s, mindfulness into the 2000s. And so it's naive to think that we've reached the conclusion, our complete knowledge of health. And so we have physical health, we have mental health, and now more and more people are starting to think about social health, which is the strength of our relationships and connection with our community that drive not only our well-being, but also the very activities that we do. The Surgeon General just came out with a warning on loneliness as a big health issue, just like the Surgeon General has given warnings towards cigarettes, towards alcohol. Now loneliness is a big mental health issue. And there's been research showing that it's akin to smoking 15 cigarettes a day if you're very lonely. And there's actually been research showing that behind the opioid crisis was a lot of loneliness. And that they've actually done research studies on monkeys showing that if given the choice between an infusion of cocaine and a strong social partner, the monkeys will choose a strong social partner, even if they don't have water and food. And so relationships are incredibly important and shape us in so many ways. And the good news is that there's more and more things that you can do and that society is doing to shape our relationships and make sure that we have these strong bonds that lead to good health.
Okay, so you're talking about isolation versus connectedness. It seems like it's what is at the root of what you're talking about. And as you mentioned, all the different, I guess, modalities, for lack of a word, that have happened over the decades that brought people into consciousness, it just seems like to me that there's not, whatever the answer is, it is not just one answer. That it's a combination of things that move us to good health, just like it's a combination of things that kind of take us down a slippery slope. It's not really just one thing. It's all these different things that come together and interact with one another. But thank you so much for that. All right, Dr. David Fakunle, what's your take on where we are in the biggest challenge?
Toxic masculinity and the anxiety of disruption. So everything that everyone has mentioned is exacerbated because we still get caught up in this idea of what it means to be a man. That's been dictated by history. It's also evolved. Men are social beings. Men are emotional beings. We are whole people. And we are dying because many men do not embrace that. They know deep down, but they don't embrace it. And that will still kill them. There's also, I won't even say fear, it's the anxiety of disruption. And this is coming from somebody who has a PhD in public health and knows all the things I should be doing to have a quality life. Ask me if I'm doing them. That's why I say public health folks are some of the biggest hypocrites in the world. It's just acknowledging that with all the knowledge, with all the understanding, it still comes down to choice. Excuse me. And we are creatures of habit. So if the habit, no matter how healthy or unhealthy it may be, is at the point of a habit, it's hard to change. And I'm sure many of us have that, and I won't say it, the full word, the epic point, right? Just screw it, just do it, right? We just one day decide to change. Sometimes it's that simple, and we realize at the same time how hard that is. So it's the whole point is that we are creating opportunities for men to embrace their full humanity. And if you're embracing your full humanity, you will better explore the physical, the emotional, the mental, the psychological, the spiritual, the financial, the practical aspects of what it means to be a whole human being. And as we've seen, the pandemic was a catalyst for most of us. Well, there you go. Sometimes it takes the most grandiose, the biggest of challenges for us to finally get the picture. And fortunately, we are here to finally get the picture. So I'm grateful for that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. I heard, what I heard in what you said was that we know the how and we know the what. But there's that dash that we were talking about earlier. But you can know the what and know the how and still not do it. That there's a block that prevents us from moving forward. And I think that's our belief system, and we can change our belief system. But that's another show. that's another show. But awareness of that is a good place to start, because we walk, and there was someone that mentioned this mindfulness. Dan, are you talking about mindfulness in the past decade? That once we get some consciousness and some clarity and some awareness about where we are, then we can pivot, then we can change. But as long as we're walking around in ignorance, we don't even know what we don't even know. So Nigel, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to hear what you feel like the biggest challenge is.
Well, the biggest challenge, the last panelist mentioned, he sort of summed up everything, and that's basically mindset, right? Mindset is a huge problem. But recognizing that mindset is always going to be an issue, because on some level, we all have our instincts have been captured, right? So I mentioned earlier about timeliness in terms of my team and I positioning ourselves in such a way that we can begin solving some of these problems. But based on everything that everybody has said, okay, all of that comes back to the immune system, period. How you choose to respond to all of these things, whether they're environmental, imagined, or otherwise, it all comes back to the immune system and the state of one's cellular structure. So once you can begin with that, then it's going to solve or begin to solve a lot of those other problems, because what is happening now is that the human body is not able to evolve fast enough to essentially coincide with the way that we are advancing technologically, right? And that's a huge problem, right? But we have a solution, okay? And that is to strengthen the immune system. And what I'm doing now with my team, we are sharing clinical protocols for individuals to be able to begin to solve these problems and thereby make a lot of the other things, whether it's stress or mental issues, whatever it is. We have a fundamental solution to actually help people ameliorate some of those things.
Nigel, what you just said really, really resonates with me. And one of the reasons that it resonates with me is when I think about my own health journey and how I would lose 50 pounds and then gain 60, lose 60 and gain 70, and just go through that cycle. I went through that cycle for 40 years before I got some clarity. But the reason this resonates with me is that for so long, all I would do was I would just look and see, okay, what can I eat and how much of it can I have? Because I'm trying to follow the diet. And I never drank the water. I never got to sleep. I never, I, I never did, I never did the writing, right? I never did the meditation. I never did any of those things. But it wasn't until I started paying attention to that I was able to finally get some peace around food. And what comes up is what everybody is saying about the mindset is that if we get to a place where we can manage our mindset, do the internal work, then the external work, then the external follows. That as long as your belief system and your behavior are in conflict, the behavior is not going to do the thing that you want to do because you're always fighting it. And when, as you said, your immune system is being fed properly and being nourished, it makes it all so much easier. And that's what it has been my experience, is that once I felt like that I was feeding um, feeding myself correctly, life became better. Life it became easier to do. It became easier to do the mental and the emotional work. So I appreciate that so much. So Dr. Newby, you're gonna bring it home for us.
Well, I would say this. I think always, remember my cardiologist. So I'm always going to say heart disease is, well, I think one of our biggest challenges. But the one thing about it is what creates the problem that creates the disease. And I think everybody touched on all the relevant points. You think about the aspect of fear. And what causes heart disease is going to be our chronic medical illnesses, hypertension, diabetes, high cholesterol levels, obesity, all these things. So you look at, challenges to me are individualized. Each man is a little different. What one may respond to, another may not. But when you talk about the fear part, avoidance, we want to avoid that which if we ignore it, it will go away. Aspects of trust, and that's what I focus my attention on, because if a man comes to see a doctor, will he trust that provider? Will that provider evoke the trust that's necessary for him to be able to convey that which is necessary to improve his health? If he doesn't trust the provider he's dealing with, the likelihood of him following any of those instructions are going to be challenged. Mm-hmm. Developing that relationship is really what's going to be one of the big things that, in my opinion, we need to really focus on as a provider. That education piece that somebody else mentioned. To really understand, you have to be taught, and to be taught, you have to, again, go back to trust those individuals you're dealing with. And then the access part, because a lot of people don't have access. We talked about the aspects of money. Do you have the money to pay your medical bills? Are you going to avoid it because you're looking at how to juggle different financial obligations? So then it boils to, I think, those social determinants of health that probably have been mentioned in different terms. People who are food insecure, house insecure. Do they have financial security? Do they have all the best aspects to live their best life? What type of environment do they live in? Are they living in an environment where you may have factories around that are polluting the air, things that you may be exposed to? So that all aspects. And my biggest challenge as a provider, and what I hate the most, and I know you guys are going to get on me about saying this, is the internet and social media. It could be our bane of our existence. We use it in a proper way, but it could be used in a negative way too. What people post, I tell people all the time, say, don't believe everything you see and read, because the internet is not regulated. So that which we see on the internet may not always be accurate. And I hate for somebody to lose their life listening to somebody who may have no medical background and trying to tell you how you should lead your life. So it's multifaceted. It's not any one thing, I think, and every man is different. I guarantee you, we have 7, 8 people on this panel. We all have different concepts and aspects of our life. So how we live that life, how we respond to things is going to be individualized. So really what we as providers need to do is identify that individual, what they respond to, and then focus there, because that builds that trust factor. So that's my little take on it.
I'm so glad that you mentioned two things, really. I'm glad that you mentioned the trust factor, and I'm glad that you mentioned the fact that there are so many on the screen and everybody has a different take. And part of that was intentional. The to address this from many different vantage points because everybody is different. Everybody is different, and because you all are so different in your perspectives and your backgrounds, although there is some commonality, my thought was that we have the the knowledge of the collective, right? That all eight of you, all eight of you bring more to the table as a group, right? It's like a mastermind. Is what it's kind of what I had in my head, and that listeners would respond to that. They would find something in this conversation that maybe one of you said, right? That was sparked by something that another person said, because we never know. We never know what seed is going to be the thing that sparks the change that people need to hear. But I do want to talk to you, Dr. Newby. I just want to tell you this little story about trust. And guys, if after I tell you this story, if you want to jump in, I would love to hear your take on it. So a while back, my sweetie got sick, but I didn't know it. I was at the tennis court. And I was at the tennis court, and I was, hitting some balls, and I heard a horn honking. And I didn't look up because I don't look at random horns. I just continue what I was doing. But then I did kind of finally look up because I heard somebody say Michelle, and I looked over, and it was him falling out of the car. He had driven to the tennis court, and he was falling out of the car. So obviously, I threw the racket down, ran to the car along with my coach, and he needed to go to the hospital. And we took him to the hospital. But here's the thing. Here's why I want to tell you why I'm telling this story, is that he had to pass the hospital to come to the tennis court. The hospital was closer than the tennis court. So this thing about trust is so big, it's so important, and I have heard other instances in the past of situations like that when somebody is up against something, they feel it, and they don't necessarily call the doctor, but they call somebody that they trust, someone that they know, and then and then we go to the hospital. So if you can speak on that, Dr. Newby, or if there's someone else on the panel. I know we're a little off what I said we were going to do, but that this trust thing is kind of
Yes.
it's sitting on me.
Well, I'm sorry.
Oh, please go ahead. I mean, I've talked my head off already, so I'll chime in on that trust factor just because of what I live every day. But please go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you. We are social beings. We are social creatures. It's been said here in so many different ways. And the way that we coexist is by relating to each other. People buy from people who they know, like, and trust, and they take their advice and their help. It just reaffirms what we're speaking about here as far as community and why social support is the new mental health, understanding the depth of that. So that was a powerful story, and it really affirms why we are on the front lines and why it's so important to relate to these health issues from a social perspective as much as possible.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Aaron. I feel like somebody else wanted to
jump in real quick.
Mm-hmm.
So same thing, like former players, right? There are a lot of former players who, the NFL's and the NFL Players Association are providing ways now, at least, to help former players. But the biggest thing is trust, and the biggest outlet is us giving the word to another player, because you're going to trust a player that you've played with more than you're going to trust the people that are giving something out, because there's been so much mistrust or negative trust that you don't know who to believe once again. So you're going to believe the person that you hang out with. And when you start seeing results, then you start saying, okay, I believe it. I'm going to go with that person. That's kind of life. You're going to go with the person that you feel the most comfortable, that has your best interests at hand, as opposed to what people are saying, because you find out a lot of times what people say is not what they do or their actions.
Yes.
and how
Yes.
you develop those relationships. One of the things I've kind of seen that I don't like in medical education now is that I found that the ability to relate to somebody is based on your social experiences, how you were raised, environments that you grew up in, but also how you just interact. And unfortunately, so I see too much of individuals in medical school now who really don't have those social graces. I mean, what cringe makes me cringe more if I see a 20-something-year-old intern say to a 90-year-old, especially an African American woman, they call them by their first name. I mean, I'm about ready to choke somebody. I know I can say this online. I shouldn't, but I do that because of respect. That aspect of respect, how you relate to people, how you demonstrate that you care about somebody. That
Mm-hmm.
to me evokes that trust factor more than if you're just talking to people. You have to
Mm-hmm.
talk with them. You have to be ingrained in there and understand their experiences in order to do that. And that's where I find we in medical education have fallen short. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why I think we run into a lack of trust. And I really think if we focus, meaning as providers, on that piece, get back into how you develop that relationship, I'm convinced that I think people would listen more, they would respond better, and I think they would take their health challenges more seriously. We still have to overcome all those other obstacles, but I think that piece is critical, and that's where I think we've fallen short.
Okay. All right. So as we are, man, the time is clicking along. This conversation is just, I'm so energized by it. But I feel like it's time to go on to what I think is the last question, about what steps, right? We've identified what the challenges are. But if you are a man right now watching this conversation, or if you have a loved one that's a man, can you identify some steps that people can take tonight, today, tomorrow, pretty immediately, to start overcoming some of these challenges? Mujahid, can we start with you?
Yeah, sure. I would definitely like to start with community, though. I think that we have to deal with these health challenges together. I'm one to take notes. So as you all are talking, I'm taking notes here. And one thing that stood out was that we have to create ecosystems of health and trust. At Keys, one of the things that I think that we found out that we had to do was, with regards to mental health, we started taking our therapists and having them do work in the same communities that they grew up in. So if I'm doing work, if I'm a practitioner, whether I'm a psychiatrist, whether I'm a therapist or physician, and I'm working with the people in the same block that my mother still lives, the idea of buy-in, I don't have to worry about, because I'm working with my people, and I don't come to you as a practitioner. I come to you just as me, and I come to you giving the love that I would give to my own mother.
Yes.
If we could find ways to put the work that we do in the blocks that we grew up in, we could be more effective as a community, and we can start to create those ecosystems. Now, for time's sake, individual approach. Individual approach, as a therapist, I'm gonna always put you in action. Get a calendar, write it down, and share it to
Mm-hmm.
someone that's going to help you stay accountable to your goal. Because when
Yes.
we write things down, we usually do it when we feel good. Those are the times we write things down. But when times get tough, we don't hold to it. We have to have accountability partners with our health. And I think that that is the individual step that I would suggest as a therapist.
Oh man, I love that. Write it down. Write it down. Writing makes it real, right? Writing makes it real. And there's something that happens when you put the pen or the pencil in your hand and it connects to the paper and it connects to your brain, there's, I don't know what the word is for it, but something changes. So I love it. And you know what I would add, Mujahid, this piece right here is that on this trust piece and the community and the connection. I remember going, I'm 65 years old, and I remember going to therapy in my 20s. So imagine how long ago that was. Going to see a therapist. And I told a friend about it. I and she kind of looked at me like I was like from another planet, but she just did. But what she told me 5 years later was this: is it because you told me that you went to therapy? It helped me know that I needed to go because I had never met anybody that had ever gone. And I went because you told me that you went. And it was like a light bulb went off in my head. And she ultimately, I was dealing with depression. She ultimately found out that she had bipolar disease that she needed to get addressed. But because we were friends and she trusted me, and I trusted her enough to tell her what was going on with me, it made a difference for both of us. So that is so key. That's key. That's key. All right, Muscleman Malcolm, what do you have for steps? What can somebody do tonight, tomorrow, today? I mean, today, tomorrow, next week to start getting on a better track?
Yeah, honestly, I mean, the first step is usually the hardest one. And when it comes to like at least health wise, the first thing I decided to do when I first got to the gym, I woke up that morning. I was like, I'm gonna go touch grass this morning. I'm gonna get outside and actually try something. And it tends to work. You kind of have to force yourself to do that first step. No one's gonna keep you accountable except for yourself. So if you want it, you'll do it. So maybe just go outside and touch grass. It might just work for you. It might work out for you.
Touch some grass. All right.
Yeah. Go
Touch some.
outside.
All right, Aaron, what you got?
Thank you. I think that the most important step in this process is first actually accepting and saying, I have a problem. I think it's being honest with yourself, and not that the cause of your life not going well is everything and everybody else. I think it's first literally that acceptance. I have a problem. And then from there are different things that you can do. To me, getting yourself a self-care formula. This is, where my particular accountability partner status comes in. My self-care formula is 5 M's. It combines music, movement, meditation, mindfulness, and mantras. And I think that is the most important step. It's actually, everybody likes music. So it's finding music that affirms you. It's actually moving your body in some way, whether it's stretching, whether it's walking, becoming active. It's actually practicing meditation, working with your breathing, working with those things that help you to maintain yourself. It's mindfulness, not judging yourself so much and observing things instead of coming to conclusions and problem solving all the time. And then you got to be saying positive, affirming statements and mantras to yourself every day. I think that's the core. Accepting, acknowledging, and being honest. And then after that, getting a self-care formula where you can take care of yourself so that you can open up to these other things.
Self-care formula. Yes, the self-care formula. That's good stuff. Ken, what can somebody do tonight, tomorrow, next week that'll get them on track?
I think one is to realize that it's not going to happen overnight. That it's a process. It's not only your process in your life, but it's also generation that you got to deal with, and what you've been taught, what you've grown up with. And then the second thing, I read this book, Atomic Habit, right? And so if you can find a habit that you have that you enjoy, attach a new habit to the old habit, right? So like for me, every day when I work out, then I'll go to Starbucks and I'll read a chapter of a book. I didn't like reading books, but now I'm reading books. Now you feel like you're doing something, and it's become a habit. So find a habit that you do all the time and attach it to a new habit that you want. And that may be something that'll be a small step in changing in your life and what you're trying to do.
Thank you. Thank you. I love that. I love that piece about habits. Now I'll share one more quick story with you. The same thing, this same friend that I was telling you about therapy during the pandemic, we decided that we were going to walk and talk every day. And so I was already a walker, but the experience of walking changed for me because it started to become something that I did with a friend, and I attached it. I attached, and I still attach these wonderful feelings that had everything to do with the conversation that we were having, and and not necessarily the walking. And so these associations are transformational, and the truth about the associations that we can decide what we associate with. We can decide on those associations and ultimately change our belief system and change our behavior. Dan?
So I'll talk on the topic of loneliness and kind of focusing on that and do some rapid fire things. So one, we know that if people are lonely, I've been there, many people have there, you're more reticent to engage with others. So one way to engage with others is to not think about who might I want to connect with, but who am I already connected with, who I could deepen that relationship, whether it be a friend or maybe I could reach out to an uncle as a mentor or something like that. The second thing is many people, men in particular, bond really well while doing an activity. So sometimes think about what's a hobby that I might want to do, and something that even if I do alone, I'm enjoying it, and then just invite another person along. That's a nice way to kind of get relationships going. There's also a lot of books on transforming relationships that are really powerful that have come out together by Surgeon General Vivek Murthy. The Unlonely Project by Harvard professor Jeremy Nobel. Casley Killam is someone who has a lot of great content coming out, and Jules Hotz has a book coming out on social prescribing. So if you want to go deep and really gnaw on these concepts, the last thing I'll say is that there's this new concept called social prescribing where doctors are prescribing community activities. This is scaled nationally in the UK, and people are bringing this to the US. There's a social movement with the organization Social Prescribing USA that's driving this forward. There's dozens of pilots happening around the country. So talk to your doctor if you're interested in this and see if something can maybe get going in your neighborhood.
Okay, that is good stuff. And I do want to say that I actually joined Social Prescribing USA because I know how important it is to use to find a way for us to connect. There's connection and healing. There's healing and connection. There's healing and connection outside of ourselves. And I do see the social prescribing as a way for us to get connected in a in a way that helps us that hasn't been available to us in the past. So I'm very excited about that. All right, Dr. Fakunle.
There are a bunch of systemic things that need to happen to greatly overhaul public health and healthcare. But let's keep it really, really simple because I believe in simplicity. At least for tonight, let's give ourselves permission to say and acknowledge and appreciate that we are not always okay, that we are not always strong, that we don't always have it together, and sometimes we fail and continuously fail. We are flawed. We are human. Embrace that. That's everybody's story. And if there's a common denominator with everything that I've listened to tonight, that everyone is hearing tonight, we all have a story to tell. And that's where I come in. Because the universal language that we all speak, no matter what the background is storytelling. So when I think about what's missing in healthcare and the future medical professionals, of which my sister is one of them, storytelling. When I think about what's missing when it comes to loneliness, when I think of the lack of connection that men are very susceptible to, storytelling. When it comes to the nuances that exist within public health and healthcare and all the things that we struggle with, storytelling, storytelling, storytelling. But the beauty is this. Every single face that I see on the screen has done it in the past hour. So clearly we're not incapable of storytelling. It's just the intentionality behind it. But Aaron, I know you know this. We work with the same people at the Baltimore station. Shout out to the Baltimore station. And this is what they get to embrace, that their story has meaning. It has value. It matters. And it doesn't matter what has happened in the story. The fact that the story exists is the meaning. So sometimes it takes the habit to create the meaning. Sometimes the meaning creates the habit. Nevertheless, meaning is everything. It has to matter to us in order for us to do it. And the strongest way that we can create meaning is to connect across human beings. What allows us to do that? Telling your story.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fakunle. I appreciate it. And man, we have run out of time, and I am just, Nigel, Dr. Newby. I want you all to add your final comments. I feel like I'll get in trouble.
Okay.
I'm good. You do your thing.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Okay, real quick. What I want to leave everybody with is 4 labs that they need to do, especially if you're a person of color: CRP, CAC, homocysteine, and apolipoprotein, okay, or ApoB, okay? Now, what you want to do as soon as possible is get on a good vitamin D with K2, okay? You can probably take about 10,000 IUs of that. The other thing you got to pay attention to, watch your hydration. A lot of us are dehydrated. But more importantly, okay, is intracellular detoxification or intracellular glutathione therapy, okay? So raising glutathione intracellularly with the right precursors will then raise those requisite cells that you need in order to deal with the stress and everything else that's happening. Like even things like various chemicals. A lot of us are drinking water from water bottles. Okay, there's a lot of things going on. There's so many chemicals everywhere. Like I said earlier, our bodies are not evolving fast enough. So the best thing you can do from a cellular level is to raise your glutathione. Don't buy a glutathione tablet because that's not going to work. There's no clinical evidence supporting that, okay? However, if you can get the right precursors, you can always raise it and you can fight just about any disease out here, okay?
Thank you, Nigel.
Sure.
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you all so much for jumping in on this conversation tonight. And I know whoever was listening got some good takeaways. I know they did. I appreciate you all. The thing that I got, and I hope everybody got, is that you can do something tonight, you can do something tomorrow, you can do something next week, but you can take action. You can take action. You don't have to be afraid, right? You can trust others, you can trust your body, you can trust your medical professional, but do something. Just one thing. Establish that habit, ask the tough questions, and just keep moving forward. Thank you all so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you, everybody.